You don't belong here. Go back to economy where you fit in." The words, sharp and cold as shards of ice, hung in the sterile air of the jet bridge. Carol Preston, senior purser for Etheria Airlines, felt a familiar surge of righteous authority. She stood, a formidable gatekeeper in her impeccably tailored Navy uniform, blocking the entrance to the aircraft. Her gaze was fixed on the two children in front of her, her expression a carefully constructed mask of professional concern that barely concealed a deep-seated disdain. They were twins, no older than 10, their faces framed by a cascade of intricate, bead-adorned braids that clicked softly with every uncertain movement. They wore matching sweatshirts, not the subdued cashmere of the usual first-class progeny, but vibrant, almost offensively bright tie-dye hoodies. Their jeans were fashionably distressed, and their sneakers, though clean, were scuffed at the toes from countless hours of play. To Carol, they were not children, they were a system error, a glaring anomaly in the curated sanctuary of Etheria Prime, the airline's flagship first-class cabin. She had spent 15 years climbing the ranks, her ambition fueled by a fervent belief that luxury was an ecosystem that required culling. First class wasn't just a ticket, it was a testament to one's station in life, a quiet club for the successful, the polished, the right kind of people. Her job, as she saw it, was to protect the delicate ambience from the uninitiated, the riffraff, the ones who simply didn't understand the unspoken rules. These girls, with their bright clothes and their black skin, were a violation of those rules. The taller of the two, Chloe, held up their boarding passes, her hand trembling slightly. "But our tickets say 1A and 1B. My sister and I. We're supposed to be in the front." Carol didn't even glance at the gold-embossed cardstock. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, scanned past the girls to the line of passengers forming behind them. A hedge fund manager she recognized from a recent magazine cover, a woman draped in a Hermes scarf, a senator from California. She felt their impatient stares. This was a performance, and she was the star, the enforcer of standards. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that was far more insulting than a shout. "Row 1 is the chairman's suite. A single seat costs more than most cars. Now, I don't know what kind of game you're playing or whose passes you found, but it's over. You're holding up people who have very important places to be." The other twin, Maya, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Her voice was quieter than her sister's, but held a surprising note of precision. "We didn't find them. Our father gave them to us. He's already on the plane, and you're not supposed to block the galley side of the jet bridge entrance during Zone 1 boarding. It's a violation of Etheria's own ground safety protocol, Section 4, Subsection B." Carol's painted smile tightened, the sheer audacity of the child quoting regulations at her. It was a detail so specific, so absurdly out of place, that it only hardened her resolve. They were clearly coached, part of some elaborate scam to sneak into the premium cabin. "Is that so?" Carol snatched the boarding passes from Chloe's hand. The names were there. Maya Finch, Chloe Finch. Seats 1A, 1B. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of doubt entered her mind. The surname Finch rang a distant, unimportant bell, but then she looked at them again. The hoodies, the braids, the lack of a hovering, Gucci-clad parent, and her prejudice slammed the door on her reason. It was a mistake, a system glitch. Or worse, fraud. "These are fraudulent," Carol declared, her voice rising, projecting for the benefit of her audience. "I don't know how you managed to print these, but Etheria does not permit unaccompanied minors in the prime cabin under any circumstances, especially not with counterfeit tickets." "They're not fake," Chloe cried, tears welling in her wide brown eyes. "Call our dad. His name is Alistair Finch. He's in his seat." "I don't care if your dad is the president," Carol snapped, her patience and her professional veneer evaporating. With a sharp, satisfying rip, she tore both boarding passes in half. The sound was like a gunshot in the hushed corridor. The two golden halves of each ticket fluttered to the grey carpet like fallen leaves. The girls gasped, a shared, wounded sound that made several passengers in the line shift uncomfortably. "You are disrupting the boarding of a federal flight," Carol hissed, leaning in close, her perfume cloying and aggressive. "You will step aside now, or I will have Port Authority security escort you from this terminal. You are not getting on this airplane." Inside the aircraft, the Etheria Prime cabin was an oasis of muted greys and soft lighting. In Suite 8A, at the very rear of the cabin, Alistair Finch was trying, and failing, to disconnect. He had promised his daughters this trip to London for their 10th birthday would be all about them. No calls, no emails, just a father and his girls. Yet here he was, hunched over his laptop, hammering out the final details of a tense merger negotiation with his Tokyo office. Alistair didn't look like the reclusive billionaire owner of the Etheria Group. Dressed in a simple grey Henley and worn jeans, he looked more like a tired tech developer than a titan of industry. He hated the ostentation that came with his wealth. He'd built the airline from a single leased cargo plane into a global behemoth, not for the prestige, but for the mechanics of it, the beautiful, complex logistics of connecting the world. His daughters were the one part of his life that defied logistics. After his wife had passed away 3 years prior, he had struggled to bridge the gap between CEO and single father. This trip was his penance and his promise. He had boarded early to personally arrange their birthday surprises in the suite. Piles of gifts, balloons, and their favorite ridiculously sugary American snacks. He'd let them board on their own, a small concession to their burgeoning independence, with their security detail instructed to hang back out of sight. He glanced at his watch. They should have been here 10 minutes ago. A knot of paternal anxiety tightened in his gut. He was about to press the call button when his personal phone, connected to the plane's high-speed satellite Wi-Fi, buzzed. It was a message from Maya's tablet. "Dad, mean lady won't let us on, ripped our tickets, said we don't belong." Alistair's blood turned to ice. He read the message again, the simple childish words painting a picture so ugly it made his vision swim. Said we don't belong. He closed his laptop with a sharp click that echoed in the silent cabin. He unbuckled his seatbelt, the sound sharp and violent. A junior flight attendant, a young man named Ben, hurried over. "Sir, the captain has illuminated the seatbelt sign. We're preparing for pushback." "Get out of my way," Alistair said. He didn't raise his voice, but the compressed fury in his tone made the young man flinch back as if he'd been struck. Alistair strode down the length of the prime cabin, his long legs eating up the aisle. The other passengers watched him, their curiosity piqued. As he reached the forward galley, he could hear it. Chloe's heartbroken sobs and a shrill, authoritarian female voice. "Final warning. Security is on its way." He stepped through the aircraft door and onto the jet bridge. The scene that greeted him was worse than he had imagined. His daughters were huddled against the corrugated wall, Chloe weeping into her hands, while Maya stood protectively in front of her. Her small face a mask of tear-streaked defiance. Scattered at their feet were the torn pieces of their golden boarding passes. Looming over them was Carol, her arms crossed, her face a storm of smug satisfaction. "What?" Alistair said, his voice a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the metal floor. "Is going on here?" Carol spun around, her annoyance at the new interruption instantly shifting to her practiced, placating smile for a first-class passenger. "Sir, I do apologize for the delay. We've had a small security issue with these children. They attempted to board using fraudulent passes. I've handled it, and security will have them removed shortly. If you could please return to your seat, we'll be on our way." "You've handled it?" Alistair repeated, his voice dangerously soft. He walked past her, ignoring her completely, and knelt before his daughters. The scent of her perfume was nauseating. "Daddy!" Chloe launched herself into his arms, her small body shaking with sobs. "She said we were liars. She ripped our birthday tickets." The word hung in the air, amplified by the sudden, dead silence from the line of passengers. "Daddy!" Carol froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving a pasty white canvas beneath her foundation. She looked from the casually dressed man to the crying children, and a horrifying equation began to solve itself in her mind. Alistair held his daughters tight, whispering reassurances into their hair. Then he rose slowly to his full height, turning to face Carol. He was no longer a passenger, he was a verdict. "You looked at my children," he said, his voice resonating through the enclosed space, each word a carefully weighed stone. "You looked at the color of their skin, the clothes on their backs, and you decided they weren't worthy. You decided they didn't belong. Sir, I didn't know, Carol stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Her professional composure was cracking, spiderwebbing under the weight of his stare. I was just following protocol. They didn't look like what, Carol? Alistair stepped closer, invading her space. Like their father owns the plane you're standing on. Like their last name is on the tail of this aircraft. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. My name is Alistair Finch. A collective gasp rippled through the line of passengers. Phones, previously hidden, were now being raised, their small red recording lights blinking like malevolent eyes. Carol's own eyes widened in sheer terror. She knew the name. Every Etheria employee knew the name. It was a legend, a myth, the invisible hand that signed their paychecks. Mr. Finch, she whispered, the name a prayer and a curse. Oh my God, it was a simple misunderstanding. A mistake. A mistake is spilling coffee on a passenger, Alistair said, his voice like flint. What you did was an act of deliberate cruelty. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. Captain Evans, this is Finch. Hold pushback. I need you, the station manager, and 2 Port Authority officers at the gate for 882 immediately. We have a crew member who needs to be removed. Removed, Carol squeaked, her panic turning shrill. Sir, please, it was an error in judgment. I can work economy on this flight. I'll apologize to the girls. I'll get them ice cream, anything. Please don't fire me. Alistair looked her dead in the eye, his expression devoid of any pity. Oh, I'm not just firing you, Carol. I'm going to make sure that the entire world knows exactly who you are and what you did here today. You wanted to be a gatekeeper. Fine. But you're about to find out what happens when you slam the gate on the wrong people. The silence on the jet bridge was no longer just quiet. It was heavy, suffocating. Carol Preston stood pinned against the wall by Alistair Finch's cold fury, the murmurs and glowing screens of the passengers behind him feeling like the judgment of a 1,000-eyed beast. But as the initial shockwave of terror subsided, something else began to bubble up from the depths of her psyche. A desperate, cornered animal instinct for survival. She had built her entire identity around her position at Etheria. She was Senior Purser Carol Preston. Without the uniform, without the authority, who was she? Just a middle-aged woman with a mortgaged condo and a deep-seated resentment for a world that had never given her what she felt she deserved. Losing this job wasn't just a career change, it was an extinction-level event. And she would not go extinct without a fight. Her mind, racing for an escape route, latched onto a sliver of defiance. This man, Alistair Finch. He didn't look the part. No Rolex, no tailored suit. He looked like their gardener. Her brain, in a spectacular act of self-preservation, rejected the reality in front of her and substituted a more palatable one. He's a fraud. A very convincing one, but a fraud nonetheless. He's trying to intimidate me into letting his kids on for free. If I back down, I lose everything. If I fight back, I'm a hero who stopped a con artist. Her fear curdled into a brittle, performative rage. She straightened her back, smoothed the front of her uniform jacket, and lifted her chin. You are a liar, she announced, her voice trembling not with fear, but with manufactured indignation. She took a step forward, reclaiming a foot of territory. She turned her address to the line of passengers, her hands spread in a gesture of desperate appeal. Ladies and gentlemen, I implore you to see what is happening. This man is an imposter. He is impersonating a corporate officer, a federal crime, to bully his way into a cabin he did not pay for. He is aggressive, unstable, and he is a threat to the safety of this flight. Alistair stared at her, a flicker of genuine astonishment crossing his face. The sheer, unmitigated gall was almost impressive. Excuse me, he said, his voice dangerously low. You heard me. Carol's voice grew stronger, feeding on the confusion she was sowing. I was protecting this cabin, protecting you, she said, pointing to the senator, from potential stowaways, and this man has verbally assaulted me and is now attempting to hijack the boarding process with threats and intimidation. I am following my security training to the letter. A few passengers wavered. The narrative of an entitled man trying to game the system was a familiar one. The senator from California, a man accustomed to having his schedule adhered to, cleared his throat impatiently. "Look, whatever is going on, can we please get it sorted? I have a connecting flight in London." "Exactly," Carol seized the opening. "This man is the reason for your delay." She spun back to Alistair, her finger jabbing the air inches from his chest. "I am ordering you to leave this restricted area now. If you do not comply, I will press charges." Chloe squeezed Alistair's hand, her small knuckles white. "Daddy, is she going to call the police on us?" Alistair's focus snapped back to his daughter. He knelt, creating a barrier with his body between his girls and Carol's venom. "No, sweetie, no one is calling the police on you." He looked up, his eyes locking with Carol's over Chloe's head. "But she should hope I don't." He stood again, his brief moment of astonishment replaced by a chilling calm. He addressed the impatient senator directly. "Sir, my apologies for this delay. However, this woman is not fit to serve as crew. Her judgment is compromised and her behavior is erratic. I cannot, in good conscience, allow her to be responsible for the safety of anyone on this flight." "You can't make that decision," Carol shrieked, grabbing for the inter-cabin phone mounted on the jet bridge wall. "I am calling the captain to have you and your delinquent children physically removed." Just as her fingers brushed the receiver, the aircraft door hissed open with pneumatic force. Framed in the doorway was Captain Marcus Evans, a veteran pilot with silver hair and a face etched with the calm authority of a man who had landed planes in typhoons. He had heard the escalating commotion through the cockpit door and had come to put a stop to it. "What in God's name is going on out here?" Evans demanded, his voice a low baritone that commanded immediate attention. "We are 15 minutes behind schedule." "Purser, why is my cabin not secure for departure?" Carol saw her savior. She rushed toward him, her face crumpling into a mask of a terrified victim. "Captain Evans, thank God, this man," she gestured wildly at Alistair, "is refusing to deplane. He produced fraudulent tickets for these children, and when I confronted him, he became aggressive. He's claiming to be Alistair Finch to threaten my job." Captain Evans's gaze followed Carol's pointing finger. He looked at the man in the simple grey Henley standing protectively over two tearful little girls. He looked at the torn tickets on the floor. The captain's posture, ramrod straight and annoyed just a moment before, seemed to deflate. A look of profound weariness washed over his features. He took off his captain's hat, tucked it under his arm in a gesture of respect, and strode past a stunned Carol. He stopped directly in front of Alistair. "Mr. Finch," Captain Evans said, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Sir, my sincerest apologies. I had no idea there was an issue. Welcome aboard." The jet bridge fell into a silence so profound it was as if the air had been sucked out of it. Carol's jaw went slack. The passengers who had been filming now held their phones aloft, like religious offerings, capturing the exact moment a career imploded. "Captain," Carol whispered, her voice a dry rasp. You know him?" Captain Evans turned, and the warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by a glacial disappointment. "Know him?" "Carol, this is Alistair Finch. He's not just the owner, he's the founder. The man who hired me 30 years ago, the Finch in the Etheria Finch Group." The final flimsy pillar of Carol's delusion crumbled to dust. This was real. This was happening. Alistair looked at the captain. "Marcus, I'm sorry to involve you in this, but we have a significant personnel failure. This purser racially profiled my daughters, accused them of being thieves, destroyed their legal travel documents, and then lied about it to you and to every passenger here." Evans closed his eyes for a brief moment, absorbing the magnitude of the disaster. He turned to Carol. "Did you rip up their boarding passes?" I thought they were fake," she stammered, backing away until she hit the cold metal of the jet bridge wall. "They didn't fit the profile. I was trying to protect the brand." "You are the liability to the brand." Alistair's voice cut through her excuses. "You are the rot I have to cut out." But Carol Preston was not done fighting. The realization that her career was irrevocably over didn't trigger surrender. It triggered a scorched earth policy. If she was going down, she was going to burn as much as she could on the way. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her face turning a blotchy, furious red. "I have a union. I have rights. This is a setup. You did this on purpose. You dressed them in those hoodies to trap me. This is entrapment." In a final desperate act of madness, she lunged, not at Alistair, but toward Maya, her finger pointed like a weapon. "You did this, you little brat. You planned this with him." Alistair moved with a speed that was shocking in a man his size. He didn't touch Carol, but he materialized between her and his daughter, a human shield of silent, immovable rage. His presence alone was enough to halt her charge. "Security!" Captain Evans bellowed down the jet bridge. At that moment, two Port Authority officers, moving with the unhurried pace of men who had seen it all, pushed through the crowd of onlookers. At the same time, the JFK station manager, a harried-looking man named David Chen, came sprinting down the corridor, his tie flying over his shoulder. "Mr. Finch, sir," Chen panted, skidding to a halt. He took in the scene, the police, the furious owner, the weeping children, and Carol standing wild-eyed and cornered. "Sir, I am so sorry. I was just alerted." The lead officer stepped forward. "What's the problem here?" "This woman," Alistair said, his voice level but lethal, pointing at Carol, "has harassed my children and is a clear and present danger to this flight. I want her removed from the airport." "No!" Carol shrieked as an officer took her arm. She tried to wrench free. "He's the one who should be removed. I am the victim here." The officer looked to the captain, the final authority on the ground. "She's off the flight," Captain Evans said, his voice heavy with finality. "Her employment with this airline is terminated, effective immediately. Get her out of here." As the officers began to drag a struggling Carol away, Alistair raised his voice one last time, a proclamation for every recording phone. "It wasn't a trap, Carol. I let my daughters dress themselves because they are children going on a birthday vacation. The fact that your mind equates a hoodie and braided hair with someone who doesn't belong is the entire problem. It's a problem you will now have plenty of time to contemplate." He stepped closer, his final words a quiet promise of ruin. "And I'm not just firing you, I'm putting you on the no-fly list. Not just for Etheria, but for all our partner carriers. You won't just be out of a job. You'll be grounded, permanently." The fight drained out of her, replaced by a horror that was absolute. Grounded. For an airline professional, it was a fate worse than termination. It was exile. "You can't," she whispered. "My life is in London. My home." "You should have thought of that," Alistair said coldly, "before you decided to bully two little girls to feel powerful for 5 minutes." As the police hauled her up the jet bridge, past the silent, staring faces of the passengers she had so desperately tried to impress, the full weight of her actions crashed down upon her. Her carefully constructed world of status and superiority had been demolished in less than 20 minutes. But as she sat in the back of a Port Authority vehicle, watching the tail of Flight 882 disappear into the clouds, a new toxic seed of a plan began to sprout in the barren ground of her ruin. Julian Thorne thought he had won. He had no idea the war had just begun. The 7-hour flight to London was a blur of forced calm. The replacement crew, summoned with record speed, treated Maya and Chloe with the gentle reverence usually reserved for visiting royalty. They were offered endless Sundays, given access to the cockpit to meet the pilots, and fussed over with a level of attention that bordered on comical. Yet Alistair couldn't shake the knot of cold dread in his stomach. He knew people like Carol Preston. Their egos were like hydras. Cut off one head, and two more, venomous and vengeful, would grow in its place. He was right. By the time Flight 882 touched down at Heathrow, Carol's counterattack was already a viral wildfire. From a sterile hotel room near JFK, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, her hair artfully disheveled, she had recorded a tearful 60-second video for TikTok. "I was fired today," she whispered into her phone's camera, her voice cracking with practiced despair. "Fired by the billionaire owner of my airline, Alistair Finch, because I followed security protocol. He and his children bypassed the proper channels, and when I politely asked for verification, he flew into a rage. He publicly humiliated me, screamed at me, and used his immense power to crush a working woman trying to keep her passengers safe. Now I'm stranded, jobless, and banned from flying home, all because I wouldn't bow to a tyrant." She ended the video with a tear rolling perfectly down her cheek. She tagged it, Justice for Carol, Chuck a billionaire bully, boycott Etheria. The internet, with its insatiable appetite for David and Goliath narratives, devoured it. The story was simple, compelling, and fit a popular narrative. The arrogant 1%er versus the common woman. By morning in London, the video had 10 million views. Etheria's stock was down 4% in pre-market trading. Alistair's phone exploded the moment he switched it off airplane mode. His head of PR, a sharp, pragmatic woman named Evelyn Reed, was on the other end of the first call he answered. "Alistair, we have a 5-alarm fire," Evelyn said, her usual unflappable tone strained. "She's painted herself as a martyr. The comments are a cesspool. Eat the rich. Power-mad CEO. We need to get ahead of this. I'm drafting a statement, but I strongly advise we offer her a generous severance package with a non-disclosure agreement. We pay her to disappear." Alistair was watching the video on his tablet as his daughters, oblivious, chattered excitedly about seeing Buckingham Palace. He watched Carol's masterful performance, the calculated tremor in her voice, the crocodile tear. He felt a surge of pragmatic weariness. Evelyn was right, settling was the smart play, the fastest way to cauterize the wound to the brand. Then he looked at Maya. She was quietly scrolling on her own tablet, and her happy expression had vanished, replaced by a confused frown. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a question that twisted a knife in his gut. "Daddy," she asked quietly, "why are all these people online calling us liars?" And in that moment, the CEO vanished, and the father took over. The cost-benefit analysis, the stock price, the PR strategy. It all evaporated in a hot flash of protective fury. This was no longer about brand management. It was about the world his daughters would inherit. "No settlement," Alistair said, his voice so firm it made Evelyn pause. "Alistair, the optics of a billionaire fighting a flight attendant." "The optics I care about," he interrupted, "are the ones in my own home. She brought my children into this. She's teaching them that if you lie loud enough, you win. I will not let that stand." He took a deep breath. "Evelyn, I want you to do 3 things. First, get me every frame of security footage from that gate, audio included. Second, reach out to every passenger who was on that jet bridge. Some of them were filming. I want their videos. Offer them lifetime first-class status in exchange. Third, and most importantly, do nothing. Say nothing. Let her talk." "Let her talk? Alistair, she's burying us." "No," Alistair said, a cold, strategic light in his eyes. "She's building her own gallows. Let her go on every morning show. Let her hire a lawyer and file a lawsuit. Give her all the rope she needs. The higher she climbs on this mountain of lies, the more spectacular the fall will be." Over the next 3 weeks, Carol Preston became a minor celebrity. She hired a publicity-hungry lawyer named Maurice Klein, who immediately filed a $20 million lawsuit against Alistair Finch and Etheria for wrongful termination, defamation, and emotional distress. She made the rounds on daytime television, a picture of wronged dignity in a series of modest blouses. She spoke of her fear, her trauma, and her unwavering commitment to airline safety. A GoFundMe started by a supporter raised over $200,000 for her legal fees. Etheria's corporate headquarters was in turmoil. The board was panicking, sponsors were getting nervous. Through it all, Alistair remained silent, his public relations team issuing only a terse, "We do not comment on pending litigation," in response to the media frenzy. He was weathering a storm of public condemnation, but he was also patiently assembling an arsenal. The preliminary hearing was set for a federal courthouse in New York. The room was a media circus. Carol walked in, flanked by her lawyer, looking confident and serene. She gave a small, brave smile to the bank of cameras. Alistair arrived alone, slipping into the courtroom quietly and taking a seat next to his lead counsel, a formidable litigator named Anya Sharma. He looked tired but resolute. Maurice Klein's opening statement was a masterpiece of populist theatre. He painted a portrait of a humble woman crushed by the boot of corporate tyranny. "Carol Preston is a hero," Klein thundered, his voice echoing in the solemn room. "A hero who was punished for daring to question the unchecked power of a billionaire." When he finished, Anya Sharma rose. She was a small woman, but she commanded the room with an aura of intense, focused energy. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm and measured, "Mr. Klein has painted a very compelling picture. A work of fiction, but compelling nonetheless. The plaintiff claims she was a hero upholding protocol. We contend she was a bully abusing her authority. The plaintiff claims Mr. Finch was enraged and aggressive. We contend he was a father protecting his children. Mr. Klein would have you believe this is a case of he said, she said." Anya paused, letting the silence stretch. "Fortunately for the truth, it is not." She nodded to her paralegal. "Your Honor, the defense would like to present Exhibit A, a multi-angle, synchronized video compilation of the events of October 12th at JFK's Gate B42, with audio sourced from the jet bridge's own maintenance recorders and supplemented by footage from 5 different passengers who have graciously provided their recordings as sworn affidavits." Carol's smile faltered. She shot a panicked look at her lawyer, who suddenly looked less like a shark and more like a man who had realized he was in a tank with a great white. "Play the video," the judge ordered, her voice flat. The large screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life. The first image was from a high-angle security camera, showing the twins skipping happily down the jet bridge. Then Carol stepped into the frame. The audio kicked in, crisp and undeniable. "You don't belong here. Go back to economy where you fit in." A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. The video cut to a passenger's cell phone angle, a close-up of Carol's face, her expression a perfect sneer. "I don't care if your dad is the president." The sharp, tearing sound of the boarding passes echoed through the courtroom's speakers, making several people flinch. Then came Alistair's arrival, his calm, low voice a stark contrast to Carol's shrill accusations. The video showed him kneeling to comfort his daughters, not screaming. The final sequence was the most damning. It showed Carol's unhinged rant, her lunge toward Maya, and her desperate, fabricated story to Captain Evans. The screen went black. The silence was absolute. Every journalist was typing furiously, their fingers flying across keyboards as they rewrote their narratives in real time. Anya Sharma turned to face a pale, trembling Carol. "Ms. Preston, in your sworn deposition, you stated under penalty of perjury that Mr. Finch screamed at you. The audio evidence suggests the opposite. You stated the children were aggressive and had no tickets. The video shows them being polite and presenting valid tickets. You positioned yourself as a guardian of safety protocol. We have one more piece of evidence. Exhibit B." An image materialized on the screen, a crystal-clear close-up of Carol's uniform captured by a passenger's high-resolution phone. Anya Sharma, Alistair's counsel, manipulated the image, zooming in with surgical precision on the ID badge clipped to Carol's lapel. The plastic card with her smiling, years younger face filled the monitor. "This is your airline-issued security credential, is it not, Ms. Preston?" Anya's voice was devoid of triumph, instead carrying the flat, sterile tone of an archaeologist presenting a fossil. "Yes," Carol whispered, her throat a desert of dust and dread. "And could you please read the expiration date printed on the bottom right corner for the court?" Carol stared at the screen. The numbers, once an insignificant detail in the periphery of her daily life, now blazed with the intensity of a death sentence. Exp. 09-30. The incident had occurred on October 12th. Her authority, the very bedrock of her identity, had been expired for 12 days. According to Etheria's own internal security manual, as well as FAA Regulations Section 1544-2029, Anya continued, her voice a relentless, quiet scalpel. An employee operating with an expired security credential has no authority to challenge a passenger's boarding status, handle sensitive documents, or enforce cabin regulations. In fact, their presence in a secure area is, in itself, a significant breach. So you see, Your Honor, the only individual on that jet bridge who was actively, demonstrably, and illegally violating federal security protocol was the plaintiff herself. A profound, suffocating silence descended upon the courtroom. It was no longer a matter of interpretation or perspective. It was a matter of black and white print on a plastic card. Carol felt a strange floating sensation, as if she were watching this happen to someone else. This couldn't be her life. She was meticulous. She was professional. She would never forget to renew her badge. But she had. In her focus on policing the world around her, she had neglected the crumbling foundation beneath her own feet. The judge, a formidable woman named Eleanor Vance, with a reputation for intellectual rigor and zero tolerance for theatrics, peered over her glasses at Carol. Her gaze was not angry, it was worse, it was dissecting. "Ms. Preston," she said, her voice laced with a chilling disappointment, "it appears that you have not only brought a frivolous and malicious lawsuit before this court, but you have also committed egregious perjury in your sworn deposition. The evidence is not merely compelling, it is absolute." Morris Klein, Carol's lawyer, shot to his feet, his face the color of old parchment. He was already raising a white flag, trying to salvage the last scraps of his own professional reputation from the inferno. "Your Honor, in light of this unforeseen evidence, we—" "Sit down, Mr. Klein," Judge Vance snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "Your client's lack of candor is now your problem. Ms. Sharma?" Anya rose, a picture of calm resolve. "We move for immediate dismissal with prejudice, Your Honor. Furthermore, we are filing a countersuit against Ms. Preston and, given his complicity in presenting a knowingly false narrative, against the firm of Klein & Associates, for defamation, quantifiable brand damages, and all associated legal fees. We are also filing a separate civil motion to have the funds from her fraudulent GoFundMe campaign seized and redistributed to the Wings of Hope Foundation, a charity that provides flight assistance to families with critically ill children. And finally, we will be submitting this entire evidentiary package to the District Attorney's Office for their inevitable investigation into felony perjury and potential wire fraud." "Motion granted on all counts," the judge declared, her gavel striking the wood with a sharp, definitive crack that echoed like a breaking bone. "This case is dismissed." Carol Preston did not move. She sat frozen at the plaintiff's table as the courtroom erupted in a flurry of motion. Journalists, their faces alight with the thrill of a spectacular kill, scrambled for the doors, their fingers already flying across their phones, rewriting their narratives from "wronged woman" to "master deceiver." Morris Klein, her champion, her advocate, was stuffing papers into his briefcase with the frantic, jerky movements of a man escaping a burning building. "Morris," she managed to say, her voice a fragile, broken thing. "What do I do? They can't take that money. It's all I have left." Klein refused to meet her eyes. He looked at the door, at his future, a future she was no longer a part of. "You lied to me, Carol. You didn't just omit details. You constructed a fantasy. You swore to me you were the victim." He snapped his briefcase shut with a sound of finality. "My firm is dropping you as a client, effective immediately. Consider this our final communication. You are on your own with the countersuit and the criminal charges. I suggest you find a very good defense attorney." He turned and walked away without a backward glance, disappearing into the river of departing bodies, leaving her marooned on a desolate island of her own creation. The silence that settled around her was heavier than any sound. It was the weight of absolute ruin. The weeks that followed were not a descent. They were a disassembly. Her life was taken apart, piece by painful piece. The countersuit from Etheria was a staggering sum, an algorithm of reputational damage and lost revenue that translated into millions. Liens were placed on her condo, her car. Her bank accounts were frozen, the numbers on the screen turning into a meaningless digital taunt. The GoFundMe money vanished, siphoned away by court order to a charity whose work was the very antithesis of her life's philosophy. The media, her former ally, became her tormentor. They replayed the jet bridge video endlessly, dissecting her every sneer, every lie. She became a national punchline, a meme, the face of entitled arrogance. Purser perjury. Gatekeeper gate. Her carefully curated identity was gone, replaced by a caricature she could not escape. She was forced to sell her condo, the place she had viewed as her fortress of solitude and success, for a pittance just to cover the initial wave of legal penalties. She moved into a small third-floor walk-up in a neighborhood she used to fly over at 30,000 feet, a place where the sirens never stopped and the air smelled of damp concrete and despair. The silence in her new apartment was a living entity, filled with the ghosts of her former life, mocking her with memories of clinking champagne glasses and the quiet hum of a first-class cabin. One evening, staring at her reflection in the grimy bathroom mirror, she tried to pinpoint the exact moment the rot had set in. It wasn't just that day on the jet bridge. It had been a slow, creeping decay over years. It was born from 1,000 tiny resentments, the promotions she felt she deserved but didn't get, the effortless wealth she saw every day but could never touch, the gnawing fear that she was, despite the uniform and the authority, just another service worker. Her prejudice wasn't a philosophy, it was a shield. By defining who didn't belong, she could convince herself that she did. Now, stripped of the uniform, the title, the authority, she looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. A tired, bitter woman with nothing left to guard. Her professional blacklisting was not just swift, it was total. The universal no-fly list was a digital cage. She tried applying for jobs in other customer-facing industries, luxury retail, hotel concierge services, but her name was a poison pill. A simple Google search was a death sentence for any application. More than once, an interviewer's polite smile would freeze, replaced by a flicker of cruel recognition. "Oh," one had said, sliding her resume back across the desk. "You're that Carol." 6 months after the trial, her savings were gone. Survival became a brutal, stripped-down equation. She found a job through a temp agency that asked no questions and ran no background checks. She became a coat check attendant at a cavernous old-world restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place she and her senior crew used to go for celebratory dinners. Her new uniform was a plain black dress. Her world was a small, windowless closet filled with the scent of damp wool and expensive perfume. She spent her nights taking coats from people who never saw her face, just her outstretched hands. She was a ghost in the machine of their glittering evenings. The irony was a constant grinding pain. She, who had built her worth on being the gatekeeper to an exclusive world, was now its most invisible servant, guarding the discarded outer layers of the people living the life she craved. One frigid winter night, a woman approached the counter. She was the epitome of everything Carol had once admired. Elegant, poised, wrapped in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Carol's monthly rent. The woman smiled a kind, distant smile as she handed over her coat. "It's dreadful out there," the woman said with easy charm. "Thank you for being here." Carol took the coat, her hands trembling slightly as she affixed the numbered tag to the silk loop. She kept her head down, her hair falling across her face. But the woman paused, her brow furrowed in vague recognition. "I'm sorry," the woman said, leaning in slightly. "You look so familiar. Have we met before? Did you use to fly the London route for Etheria?" Carol's blood ran cold. She looked up, and for a terrifying second, she thought she was recognized. But the woman's eyes held no malice, only polite curiosity. She didn't see perjury. She just saw a face that reminded her of someone who had once served her a glass of champagne. In that moment, Carol understood the true nature of her punishment. It wasn't the public shame or the financial ruin. It was the utter, crushing irrelevance. She wasn't even a villain anymore. She was just a half-forgotten memory. "No," Carol said, her voice a dry rasp she barely recognized. "I'm sorry, you must be mistaken." The woman shrugged, her smile unwavering. "My apologies." She pressed a $5 bill into Carol's hand. "For your trouble." Carol watched her walk away, a graceful silhouette disappearing into the warm, golden light of the dining room. She looked down at the crumpled bill in her palm. It wasn't a tip, it was an alms, a small offering of pity for a ghost in a black dress. She leaned against the wall of her closet, surrounded by the coats of a world she could no longer enter, and for the first time she didn't feel anger or resentment. She felt a profound, bottomless emptiness. The gate had been slammed shut, and she was on the wrong side. Meanwhile, in the world she had been exiled from, Alastair Finch was engaged not in victory, but in reconstruction. The incident had been a near-fatal diagnosis, revealing a cancer in the culture of the company he had built. He realized his obsession with logistics, with the beautiful mechanics of the machine, had made him blind to the corrosion in its soul. He had sat in his office for days, watching the jet bridge video over and over, forcing himself to see it not as a CEO, but as a father. He watched the light dim in his daughter's eyes. He heard the tremor in Chloe's voice. He saw the defiant terror on Maya's face. He had won in court, but he had failed on that jet bridge. He had built a world with the power to wound his own children. His first act was a conversation. He found Maya late one night in the living room, her tablet glowing in the dark. She was quietly watching a news report about the trial. He saw his own face on the screen, his voice low and angry. He saw Carol's face, contorted in a lie. He sat down beside her, not taking the tablet away, but watching with her. When it was over, he turned to her. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling achingly inadequate. "I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry you had to live it." Maya was quiet for a long time. "You were scary, Daddy," she said finally, not looking at him. "When you got angry, you were like a thunderstorm." The words hit him harder than any lawsuit. He had unleashed his power to protect her, but in doing so, he had also shown her a terrifying side of himself and of the world. "Sometimes," he said slowly, choosing his words with immense care, "you have to be a thunderstorm to clear the air. But I never ever want you to be afraid of me. The anger wasn't for you, it was for the unfairness, for the idea that anyone could look at you and Chloe and decide, just by looking, that you are worth less. That idea is a poison, Maya. And sometimes you have to use a loud voice to tell the world it's wrong." He pulled her close, and for the first time since that day, she leaned into him completely, her small body relaxing against his. He hadn't just fixed a problem, he had begun to heal a wound. The Etheria Cares initiative was not a PR campaign, it was an institutional exorcism. He didn't delegate it, he led it. He sat for hours in mandatory empathy training sessions with pilots and flight crews, not as their CEO, but as a fellow participant. He listened to stories of casual bias and microaggressions that made his stomach turn. He implemented a new, truly anonymous reporting system, and when the first report came in about a senior gate manager making dismissive comments about non-English-speaking passengers, Alistair didn't issue a warning. He flew to Dallas and fired the man himself face to face. The message was clear. The rot was being cut out, root and stem. A year to the day after the incident, the Finch family was once again at JFK, walking down the familiar corridor to Gate B42. There were no balloons this time, no grand surprises. The trip was not an event, it was a reclamation. As they approached the aircraft door, a new senior purser, a man with a warm smile and kind eyes, greeted them. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Finch," he said, then knelt, bringing himself to eye level with the girls. "And welcome, Maya, Chloe. We are so very happy to have you with us today. If there is anything at all you need to make your flight more comfortable, you just have to ask." Chloe, who had been so traumatized, now looked up with genuine curiosity. "Is it true the wingspan of this plane is wider than the distance of the Wright brothers' first flight?" The purser's smile widened. "It is, by about 90 feet. Would you like to see the cockpit after we reach cruising altitude?" Captain Evans would be delighted. Maya, who had been so defiantly silent, looked the man directly in the eye. A small, confident smile touched her lips. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We'd like that very much." Alistair watched the exchange, a profound, quiet relief washing over him. He followed his daughters into the cabin. They weren't just healing, they were thriving. The ugliness hadn't broken them, it had, in some strange way, made them more curious, more confident, more aware of the world they were inheriting. As the plane climbed into the vast open sky, leaving the sprawling city behind, Alistair looked not out the window, but at his daughters. They were pointing at the clouds, their heads together, their laughter filling the quiet space of the cabin. He realized that the true measure of his success was not the altitude of his aircraft or the value of his stock. It was this. It was their resilience. It was the sound of their joy. He had learned that true belonging wasn't about having a golden ticket to an exclusive club. It was about creating a world where no child ever had to prove they had a right to be there. The sky outside was infinite, but for the first time in a long time, Alistair Finch felt like he was finally, truly, home.